Welcome to our final parallel session, last session before the closing and the announcement of the Internationally Learning Award winners. So it's our 3:30 session, and it's good to have everyone back with us. And our first speaker in the session comes from Teachers College, right here, and where I teach part-time as well. And JD is here to talk about the effectiveness of an intelligent question answering system for teaching financial literacy, and it's a pilot study. So I'm looking forward to hearing about that and its results. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you. You want to share your screen at your convenience and take it away.
Thank you, David. Let me share my screen.
Great. All
right. So my name is J D Jayaraman, and this is joint work with Dr. John Black, and I'm an associate professor in finance and data science at New Jersey City University, and also a PhD candidate at Teachers College. So the title of my study is Effectiveness of an Intelligent Question Answering System for Teaching Financial Literacy. And this is a pilot study that I'm presenting. The agenda today is going to be, I'll start off with a brief introduction, and I will outline the research questions, set up the theoretical framework, describe the IQA system, and go over the research design, results, limitations, and conclude. So that's the agenda for today. So what I wanted to do is, since financial literacy is not really often talked about topic, I wanted to kind of set the stage of what is financial literacy, why is it important, and that is something that I wanted to share up front, since it's not like math or English or other things that are often researched. This domain is not that often researched. So the financial literacy is defined by the Program for International Student Assessment, the PISA program, which many of us in the education field are familiar with. So it defines financial literacy as the knowledge and understanding of financial concepts, the risk, skills, and motivation and confidence to apply that knowledge, and to make effective decisions across a range of financial contexts to improve one's financial well-being. Right. So the definition is very comprehensive, and it has three parts to it. One is the knowledge and understanding of financial concepts. The other is the motivation and confidence to apply such knowledge. And the third is to make effective decisions with that knowledge. Right. So our study here focuses mostly on the knowledge aspect of things. We are not so much interested in researching the motivation and the effective decision making. Why is financial literacy important? And this is something that's kind of I'm passionate about, and I have a background in finance, and so this is something that nobody talks about, but it's a very, very important thing and affects almost all of us, either directly or indirectly. Right? So the PISA survey, for example, the most recent one, 15-year-olds, showed that the United States has a very low levels of financial literacy, and it's below the average of OECD countries. And the situation is overall bad across the world. The percentage of technically or financially literate people are only 33%. Right? So in the US, it's around 40 to 45, that range. So here financial literacy really means very basic finance, very basic personal finance, things like knowing about interest rates, your credit cards, mortgages, that type of stuff, right? So it's kind of concerning that young people in the United States don't really have that type of basic personal finance knowledge. So what are the consequences of this lack of knowledge about basic personal finance? The numerous consequences, right? And again, some that are obvious, some that are not obvious. Right? So the lack of financial literacy leads to increase in debt and cost of borrowing. It leads people to plan less for retirement. It leads people to accumulate less wealth. So it has a lot of impacts, right? If you do not gain enough knowledge about personal finance early on, your financial well-being later in life and is greatly affected in terms of accumulating wealth or preparing for retirement, buying a house. All these things get affected. Most pretty striking example of lack of financial literacy leading to some bad consequences is the 2008 financial crisis. And so one of the causes of that crisis can be linked back to lack of financial literacy, right? So one of them, as you many know, the main cause of that crisis was the mortgages, right? And the lack of knowledge about various types of mortgages, the interest rate structures, and how much one pays, and all that kind of thing partly led to the financial crisis. So, what is the motivation behind this study, and why am I interested in this topic? Again, the consequences of financial literacy make it a really important topic. For me personally, it's on par with math or language arts, anything else like that. But the important point is there is not much research done on personal finance education or financial literacy, right? So effective methods of delivering financial education, these are not part of the research agenda for most people, right? So what we need to do is, given the importance of this domain, there needs to be more work done to investigate innovative methods of teaching financial literacy. And one approach that one can take is through the use of cutting edge technology. Right, so you can use intelligent tutoring systems, intelligent question answering systems, et cetera, to deliver financial literacy education or support financial literacy education. Right, these things are used in other fields like math, science, language arts, and other areas, but in financial literacy, I don't think there is anything at all at this stage. So, to the best of my knowledge, then this is the first attempt at trying to build the intelligent question answering system in the domain of financial literacy. Of course, it's been done in other domains, but what I'm trying to do here is trying to extend that to the financial literacy domain and adapt it to this domain. Let's see. So the research questions that I'm trying to answer with this study are: how can we build a cutting-edge intelligent QA system for practice and scaffolding the domain of financial literacy? And so the key thing is I'm looking to build a system not necessarily for full-fledged teaching of financial literacy, but more as a support system for practice and scaffolding. Right? So that is the important point here. The second question is, does the use of such an IQA system increase learning in the domain of financial literacy? Right? So is it effective? Does it increase learning? And the third question is, how does it increase learning? Right? So those are the three questions that I'm trying to research. And this pilot study is kind of like the beginning of this research. The theoretical framework of the study is based on the theory of skill acquisition, as from Anderson, 1982. And the theory says that skill acquisition has two phases. One is a cognitive phase, where a declarative representation of the procedure is established, and an associative phase characterized by the proceduralization of the skill, which leads to automation, right? So in this associative phase, much practice is necessary with not much close supervision other than corrective feedback, right? So it is also needs to be individualized to a certain extent based on the student. So if you think about these two criterion, the IQA system kind of is ideally suited for providing the student with individualized practice. Right? So that is kind of the one of the theories underlying the study. And the other theory is the theory behind instructional scaffolding. Scaffolding, we've heard this word used all the time. And it's kind of related to the zone of proximal development, which we all know. The IQA system basically scaffolds the students' learning by allowing them to use the system to find answers to questions as they are studying or as they are learning the content, right? So it's kind of has two purposes: one to provide practice, and the other is to provide scaffolding by means of answering questions, right? So these are the two things that are underlying the system, the theoretical underpinnings of the system. Let me get into describing the system itself. The system consists of three parts, three modules, basically. One is the question answering module, the second is the evaluation module, the third is the feedback module. So I'll briefly touch on what each module does. Right? So the question answering module is based on the popular state-of-the-art NLP, natural language processing model from Google, which is called BERT. And I guess now there are even more powerful models that have come out, but BERT is still a very heavily used NLP language model. And we leverage the BERT model in this building this system. And in particular, we used a closed domain question answering system that's called CDQA Suite. And this is public domain software that's out there. The libraries are out there for in open source. So we use that library. And this library comes with the pre-trained BERT question answering model that's trained on the SQuAD database. And for the pilot study, we essentially focused on one particular topic in financial literacy, because financial literacy in and of itself is a pretty broad topic. So in order to make the study manageable, we focused on consumer credit, which is basically credit cards, mortgages, and things like that. So we trained the BERT QA model with a data set curated for this domain of consumer credit. So we created a data set that consists of paragraphs and question answers from various books and websites on the topic of consumer finance. And we used that to further train the BERT QA model. The evaluation module is compares the student's answer to the question answering module's answer. So in some ways, the student types in an answer, the answer gets compared to the answer generated by the BERT QA model, which is technically the right answer, right, or the ideal answer. And it it calculates what's called a BERT score, and BERT score is a text matching evaluation metric based on BERT embeddings, and it's used widely as well, and it kind of has been shown to closely correlate with human judgments. So we've used the BERT score as a measure of how good is the student's answer. And the student's answer is scored as a percentage based on the BERT score. The feedback module is currently a rule-based system, and it's a pretty simple rule-based system for this pilot study. We didn't have the time to make it super sophisticated, but if the BERT scores are about 0.8, we basically provide a congratulatory feedback and move on to the next question. But if the scores between 0.6 and 0.8, we ask the student to improve the current answer and highlight the part of their answer that is different from the correct answer. The scores below 0.6, we ask the student to redo the answer. Right. So it's a fairly simple rule-based feedback, which essentially can be improved, and that's one of the limitations of the study that I talk about at the end. So what's the workflow of the system? The system basically posts a question randomly chosen from a list of 150 questions grouped by 5 levels of difficulty. So the student starts off the practice and the system generates randomly a question picked from this, the lowest level of difficulty. And then the system becomes adaptive based on, again, rules. So it's again a fairly straightforward rule-based adaptivity, and not necessarily as intelligent adaptiveness. So what we do is, if the student gets 0.8 or about 3 times in a row, and then we go on to the next level of difficulty and so on. Right? Also, at any point during the practice session or otherwise, the student can basically ask any question. Right. So this is the scaffolding part where the student can just click a button and put in a question, and the system answers that question. So that is independent of the practice module and can be accessed at any time. So that's kind of like, in a nutshell, a high-level overview of the system itself. So next, I'll describe the research design that we use to answer whether the IQA system was effective or not. So again, this is a straightforward one group pre-test, post-test design. And since this is just a pilot study, we also have a fairly small sample. We used a 15-question assessment instrument to measure learning pre and post the IQA system. The instrument was basically questions taken from standard textbooks. Then we also used a short survey to assess the effectiveness of the IQA system. And we also interviewed the students to understand how the IQA system helped them learn. So these are the 3 things we did. So basically, the students attended a 2-hour lecture on consumer credit that also included a short tutorial on how to use the IQA system. After the lecture is over, they were given a homework due before the next class, which is in a week's time, to practice using the IQA system. The students had to answer at least 30 questions with a BERT score of 0.8 or higher. And of that 30, they needed to have at least 5 questions at the highest level of difficulty. The pre-test was administered after the lecture, but before students started using the IQA system. The post-test and the survey were administered when they came back to class the next week and before the lecture started. So that's kind of the procedure. And let me show you the results for the study. Again, the sample size was pretty small. There's only 15 students participated. And since this pilot study, the sample size is pretty small. Since the sample size is very small, I've used non-parametric statistics to assess learning gains. So here in these tables that I've shown here, you can see that the PCS in this table stands for percentage correct score. Basically, how many questions, what percentage of questions you got right on your assessment. Right? So you can see that from pre and post, the increase in the PCS is about 19%, and the effect size is about 1.8, 1.9, which is a fairly large effect size. Again, since this is a small sample, I used the Wilcoxon sign rank test, non-parametric test, and the non-parametric shows that the difference in the pre and post PCS percentage correct scores are pretty statistically significant. The survey questions we asked are over here. We asked, did the IQA system homework help you learn better? How accurate did you think were the answers provided by the system? We wanted to get a sense for how good is the system as well, so we can improve on it, in the next iteration of the study. So we do see that the system did help, but we do see here as well that things can be improved, right? So that's the takeaway from this survey we did. And we also did interviews, like I said, with this small group of students and asked them, how did it actually help, and how did it help? And just to get a sense for, okay, what's going on here? How is this system helping you? And it was not necessarily a very structured interview. It's a more open-ended, semi-structured interview. And the main thing that people said was it did let them practice at their own pace. And one thing they always said was, and the question answering is good because I don't have to ask questions, be shy about asking questions like I am in class, where many students don't actually ask questions because they're just shy to ask questions. And so that's what we found in that. And in terms of limitations, again, I've talked about a lot of this already. It's a small sample size since it's just a pilot study. And we also know from the surveys and from, we knew when we designed it itself, is there are lots of improvements we can make on the feedback system because it's just a rule-based system. We can also make improvements on the adaptiveness of the system as well to make it more smart, more intelligent. And so all these things are being worked on. They take time to build. So we wanted to get something out there quick and see if it actually makes a difference. And that's the reason. So a lot of the drawbacks were expected, limitations were expected. Again, in order to really make concrete conclusions that the system actually is causing learning gains and is better than just a paper and pencil practice like in good old days. We really need to do a randomized control trial. And that is on our agenda next. To conclude, this is, to my knowledge, the first attempt at using such a system to teach personal finance or support the teaching of personal finance. So in the domain of personal finance, financial literacy, to the best of my knowledge, this is the first attempt. Of course, such attempts have been done in other areas like math and science. The results of this pilot study were encouraging in the sense that we do see large gains, but of course, the sample size is small, so it needs to be taken with a grain of salt. But the pilot study does indicate that there is enough evidence there to pursue this further and to even pursue with the main study and take it further and do the randomized control trial. So that's of course the randomized control trial is the most important thing, and along with some improvements we need to make to the system. And that is the next step in our agenda. And that is all I had. If there are any questions, I can take them.
All right, well, great. Well, thanks so much. There's time for a question or two. I was kind of curious, is there an example you can give of just what a sample question and response might be from the system that you had? Depending on
yeah, so it'll be like this, where what is consumer credit? The answer would be what is credit? What is, so we essentially, this the type of, it's not you're not asking very complex questions. It's fairly straightforward to that aspect. The more we train it, the more we train the thing, the more complex it gets. At this point, we've curated about 150 such questions, and it's not. You're not asking these exact questions. You can word the question however you want, but the system will kind of answer it based on how you train the system, right? So that's the there's more work needs to be done in training it further. That's always the problem with these NLP systems, is you got to have reams of data to train it well to make it answer. But the good thing with the BERT is that it's already pre-trained on language data, so it can answer questions much better than a straight ground up system. So that's the nice thing about it.
Oh no, it's cool. No, I'm interested. I'll have to read the paper and learn a little bit more about it. Like I think I mentioned earlier today, I did some parsing related work way back, and it kind of, that field seemed to kind of have stalled for a little bit, and I think doing it in a close domain, closely held domain is really the only way to go, which is what you're doing, and it's great to see that you're getting some results. I'm really interested in that.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you so much, and say hello to John Black for us here. Many of us know John. So
I will.
Great. Well, great to see you. And I think we can wrap up. So we're on to time. We're on time for the next talk. So we're going to move on to the next talk. So thanks again, JD. It's great to meet you.
Thank you. It was nice meeting you, and take care.
You too.